What is going on, everyone? My name is Jonathan here, host of the Venue RX podcast, and I am really excited to have Lindsay Lucas today on my show. Lindsay, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to chat today.
Uno, dos, tres.
For any of those of you who are listening or watching this on YouTube who aren't aware, Lindsay has you have your own show, correct?
I do. I co-host the Venue podcast with my business partner, Kinsey Roberts. We have a lot of fun over there.
We're going to have all sorts of fun talking about venue stuff today because we're, the Venue RX. We talk about all sorts of different venue specific topics, but also vendor related topics and how to run a better business in this space. And so I'm so excited to talk to you because you also have a wonderful, it's a consulting business, correct?
Yeah. So I do consulting for wedding venues specifically. I've been doing it since 2016. So lots of fun.
That's incredible. Just right off the top, I'm curious, what are some changes that you've seen in the industry? Obviously, let's not even talk about COVID, right? But like change.
Okay, I was like, okay.
Okay, like a big one there. Yeah. What changes have you seen maybe as you've gone along in your career? Because working with venues since 2016, I mean, a lot of folks in 2012, 13 are kind of coming out of the slump from the whole real estate crash, financial, thing that happened in 2009, 10. So there's kind of a recovery there. Have you seen kind of maybe let's talk pre-COVID, a big change from 16 to maybe 2020, beginning of 2020?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like our lives are divided now between pre-COVID and post-COVID. So yeah, whenever I first got started, I feel like, first of all, just for context, I live in Houston or the surrounding area of Houston. So I attract a lot of Southern venues in the Southern states. And so I've seen a lot of barns. So just like from a trend standpoint and aesthetically speaking, there have been a ton of barns, which I feel like is fantastic. I'm not opposed to barns at all. I feel like the barrier to entry is a little bit lower because a lot of people already own them and they're just renovating and flipping and converting them to be a revenue stream essentially, and making their property pay for itself, which is brilliant. I'm excited now. I feel like right before COVID hit, we were starting to make this shift I was getting tons of inquiries on people saying, I want to be different. I have a lot of barns in my market. I want to do something different. And a lot of our clients are going that route right now. I have a venue in Texas that I'm working with that's a Colorado lodge. I have another one that I'm working with that is a hacienda vibe, which is gorgeous. So I am super excited for venue owners to be, especially new and aspiring, obviously, whether you're new construction or renovating, leasing, it doesn't matter, but to be brave enough to go out on a limb and do like a different trend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of topics there. I'm curious though, why Houston? How'd you end up in Houston?
I was born here.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So I was born in one of the surrounding tiny little towns, and went off to school, ended up coming back to Houston, didn't go back to my hometown, but my husband and I met and we moved to an even smaller town. We love our elbow room. So we bought some land out here.
That's very, very cool. Do you have any dreams of putting a venue on your own property? You said you have a little bit of elbow room. Would you ever do that?
No, I get this question a lot. I have never owned a venue, nor do I plan to.
Okay.
Which
Awesome.
usually spikes a lot of other questions like why and do I see a problem there? A lot of people see it as like a red flag, and no, it's just a personal preference. I know my personality. I can't sit still long enough in one business. So I like to build other people's businesses for them, teach them how to run it, make it profitable, sustainable in a market that's constantly changing, and then move on and cheer them on from afar, let them fly the nest, and yeah, just cheer them on and move on to the next.
We have so much in common. I can't wait to unpack this a little bit more because I'm the same way. In fact, we started the staffing company that we have because I literally could not, like, there's something geographically about having to be in the same four walls or whatever of an organization that just I could not handle when I was, starting to work different jobs, and I had all these jobs, and it was like, I need to find a job that I'm constantly doing new jobs,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And it sounds like you're kind of a similar, kind of have that similar bent.
Yeah, I don't have any interest in owning my own venue, but that's not to say that I'm not interested in being a silent investor for somebody, especially for like a client. Like I had a client that they went for their funding and they fell short, and that amount that they fell short cost them their chapel. And so they were going to nix their chapel. And so I went back to my husband and said, I would really like to be a private investor for this client. And at the time, we just weren't in the place to be able to do that. And so that's like a major goal that I have for this year, is to be an investor.
That's awesome. That would be really, really cool, because that would kind of allow you to still dip your toe in a lot of the different, ponds and different businesses, but really have an incredible impact. So let's talk about that, and kind of we're now in this post-COVID, or not post-COVID, maybe we're still kind of working through it. And I know so many different businesses are able to handle this differently. If you are a venue in Florida or maybe even Texas, the opening restrictions are definitely different than, where we live here in Southern California. Things have been much slower to open. What are you seeing from do you work with other venues in other states other than Texas?
Yeah, I work all over the nation. I actually just got my first international client. And I say international, they're in Canada, so not that far of a reach. But he was talking to me about his restrictions, and I was just like, oh man, my heart just goes out for all of you. So we're working on some things behind the scenes, so it's ready to hit the ground running when things do open up.
Definitely. How did you get into this? Because you said you don't own a venue, but you have this passion for working with all these other things. How did you even get into working with venue owners, being a consultant? Did you come initially from the industry? Did you work as a planner or something, or how did you get into it?
Yeah, so I was a planner. I broke into the industry in 2010. I started planning my own wedding, which just kind of snowballed into all of my friends' weddings. Built a business, soon built a team underneath me. And we had a little bit of a different approach in our planning company. Our clients obviously were top priority, but a very, very close second priority for us were the venues. And so we would go in as soon as we booked a couple and we found out who their venue was, we would immediately, if we didn't already have a relationship built, we would reach out and say, hey, send us your policies and procedures, send us any information on you that you would like for us to have, so that we can make sure that we're not only serving our client, but we're serving you through our client by making sure that our client and their guests are abiding by your policies and procedures. And by the way, we would love to serve you. Is there anything that we can do to help you? And soon, because of that approach, a lot of vendors in the industry that started to get to know our company, as new venues would pop up, the venue owners would reach out to those vendors, and those vendors would say, I really am not the person to talk to. I don't know the answers to this. Like maybe it's a DJ or somebody. And they would say, you really need to talk to Lindsay. She's always happy to help. And so that just kind of lit a fire. I started having a lot of new venues, mostly barns that were popping up in the North Houston area, reach out and say, hey, can we just get you on site and to take a look at things and help us? We have a lot of questions. Is there any pitfalls that you can recommend that we avoid, or potentially forecasts that could be coming with what we're doing? And so I would go out there and spend hours, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then I soon realized that if I really wanted to take this thing to the next level and serve them really, really well, I was going to have to create a streamlined program, consulting of sorts. So I hired a coach. I actually am always constantly working with some sort of coach myself and constantly learning depending on the area that I'm interested in. And so I went to this coach. I had done my research, couldn't find anybody that had already built the wheel for me that was already doing venue consulting. I was the first one in the United States that I could find. I reached out to someone in the UK and never heard back. So I hired a coach and said, hey, I want to do this thing. It doesn't exist. It's going to be really hard. Are you in? And she said, yeah, let's do it. So we built it from scratch, and I didn't even have a website and just started telling people I was a venue consultant and doing this thing. Um, in between that, I had been a venue manager before for one venue. And then I had also had a partnership agreement, and my planning firm was the in-house coordination team for another venue.
Okay.
And so I had a lot of experiences with venues. I had always, from the time I started my planning business, I'd always been attracted to venues and just very interested in like the back end work. Like, how does the business function? How does it tick? What makes it successful? And I just started studying quietly for years.
Okay, so I love that you started as a coordinator because, and kind of like had that unique eye. I feel like that's one of the most powerful things that a venue could do is get the perspective of someone who's dealing directly with their clients.
Yeah,
And I just don't feel like enough venues do it. And that's kind
I
of one of the
agree.
things that even as a venue management company, and as we've worked with some of the venues, I've even wanted other, coordinators to come and like, please look at this from a planning perspective, from a coordination perspective, from the couple's perspective, because we're not necessarily looking at it that way. We're looking at it
Yeah.
from a property perspective. What kind of are some of those pitfalls that you mentioned that people are consistently overlooking?
A lot of them overlook client experience.
Okay.
I am huge on client experience. You can book a consult off of my website, just like an hourly consult. And almost everybody that does, they want to talk about, especially if they're an existing venue already or a seasoned venue, they come to me and they say, my market is getting oversaturated. All these new kids are coming into the block. They look beautiful and trendy, and I'm kind of old news. How can I revamp my venue? And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tell them, don't dump your money into renovations unless something needs to be brought up to code. You need to step back and take a look at how you can have a higher client experience, because I truly believe that that is a huge area that's overlooked with venues. A lot of venues, they not that they think that their couples are just a transaction. It's definitely not. I don't want to speak bad on that. But I think that it is like that's not the first thing that they think of is up leveling their client experience. They think of aesthetic, they think of um anything else, and that is usually an afterthought. So I think that that is the easiest thing to set them apart, as well as one of the cheaper things, honestly.
Totally. I love that you said that. I feel like as kind of the 500-pound gorilla in the whole entire, you know, field of a wedding, like, if you think
Yeah.
about an entire wedding, a lot of the money is going to the venue, you know,
Yeah.
a majority of it's going to the venue. And so because of that, if a venue is situated really well on a beautiful piece of property, or aesthetically they are really, really appealing, they kind of know that they have, I don't want to say the upper hand, but they know that they're going to get the bookings. They know that when they do the tours, there's kind of a calculated amount of, inquiries that they're going to get based on the marketing, SEO, all the other things. And so they can, I don't want to say slack, but I think I'm with you. Like they can
Right, right.
kind of not focus on the client experience as much, because they know that even if it's kind of sort of off, that couple wants to get married near that waterfall or that gazebo or that whatever
Yeah.
physical thing. Um,
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's a silver lining to COVID, right? Like micro weddings that are popping up. I listened to your episode with Bethel Nathan, and she hit the nail on the head as far as client experience is concerned with micro weddings. The couple still have the same budget, less guest count, and they're able to spend more per guest and just completely like flip this idea on its head of I want to throw a crazy party, everybody on the dance floor versus okay, things have changed. My idea of my wedding has changed. I've kind of fallen in love with this new idea of really, really catering to my guests and making it an incredible experience. And that's a trend that I really hope stays.
Okay, so let's move into that, because I'm excited to talk to you about kind of understanding as a venue, as a new venue comes into a space, or maybe even you're an established venue, you kind of want to differentiate yourself a little bit. You talked about client experience, but how do you feel about a new venue coming into a space and maybe being like a lookalike venue? You said that there, 2019, you saw some of the shifts in people starting to differentiate themselves. What advice would you give someone who's just coming into the space? They're like, I have a beautiful piece of property. I want to start a venue. I've got a barn, to your point. How do they stand out among the 50 other barns that are in a, 20-mile radius?
Yeah. So I'm going to give an obvious answer, and then I'm going to come back and flip it on its head for you.
Love it.
First obvious answer is a lot of new venues, whether they went to their cousin's wedding and were just blown away and their eyes were open, like, this is a really big profitable business, I can totally do this. A lot of venues, they have blinders on as far as like tunnel vision, and they only look at the venues that are in their market. So if you're an aspiring venue, I would encourage you to look outside of your local market, outside of your state. What trends in other geographical regions within the United States or even outside of the United States? I love studying architecture in over in Europe. I think it's gorgeous. I would love to see more European style venues come over here. But what trends and architectural aesthetics can you bring to your market? That, for one, is going to set you apart. The aspect that I want to,
go ahead. I have a quick question about that. So it's tricky because do you feel like that may be a double-edged sword? You're going to have this beautiful European architecture maybe, but maybe everyone in Houston is looking for a barn wedding or something like that. Have you found that that's kind of backfired? Because sure, it could differentiate yourself, but maybe in a bad way. What's your thought on that?
That's the perfect question to segue into. Me flipping this information on its head is doing your feasibility study. So I had one client that came to me and said that they had 2 different properties in 2 different metropolitan areas, wanted me to run a feasibility study on each and tell them which one they should build on. So we did that. And one was an easy no, because when we ran the report, we saw that within a 21-mile radius, there were 19 other venues. So obviously that's a no. That market is way oversaturated. So we pivoted and we started building in the other property. But I also had another client, through doing a feasibility study, what we discovered, she initially obviously wanted to build a venue. What we discovered within the study was, this actually isn't the perfect market for a venue, but it is a perfect market for a boutique hotel. So let's flip the script. Let's go back to the drawing board and take a look at what that business looks like. And we did, and she is incredibly successful now.
That's amazing. And I am hearing this going, oh my gosh, every single new venue owner needs to hire you, because if they don't do a feasibility study, and I want to ask you about that a little bit, but if they don't do that, then it's almost like they're just kind of trying to scratch their own itch. There's maybe not some market validation, I guess.
Right.
And I see that quite a bit, I think, especially at the beginning of 2020, end of 2019. People were just kind of saying, oh, I'll just host weddings, or I had my daughter's wedding or a friend's wedding on my property. They loved it so much. Why don't we just do this? And it's not like the area geographically needed another venue.
Right.
It was just there. And so there was a lot of competition, but it was hard to kind of, differentiate yourself, because everyone with a nice piece of land was just, trying to host something. So what bits of information are you looking for in these feasibility studies that help you make this determination?
A lot. So our feasibility studies, we run a national report, a regional report, and then a very detailed local study as well. We comb through all of that data, pull out the snippets that are most important, and put it into a really in-depth presentation for the client. And we get on the call and go through everything, talk through everything that we have found. And a lot of the things that we are looking for is oversaturation versus undersaturation. Very rarely do we hit kind of in the middle of that. It's usually one or the other. Undersaturation, we're kind of towing that line of, we have to have a conversation at that point of, what is your risk adversity level? Like, as from a trend standpoint, to your point, as far as going back to the European venue concept, are you super risk adverse to where you're like, oh, I don't know, if I want to spend millions of dollars on a look that has no proof of concept in my market? Or are you willing to take a chance because you feel in your gut and just so strongly that this is going to be great? You might be the black sheep for a little while, but get a great marketing team behind you and the trends are going to start coming your way. Are you willing to, you know, do the trade-off there? So we have a conversation on risk adversity, and then oversaturation is, okay, let's take a look. This market is oversaturated. If they already own the property, what is another way that we can make that property profitable? And that our very next thing that we look at is, does that area need hotels? Does it need cute cabins, Airbnbs? Like, what does that look like?
Do you work with a lot of people that prefer to do all-inclusive type venues where they're selling a 30, 40, $50,000 package? Or do you work with more of those blank canvas venues that, you know, maybe it is a beautiful barn or something else where they are bringing all of the vendors in?
Yeah, this is I'm so excited for this question. I'm sure you can see my smile getting bigger. I I feel like all inclusive is on the verge of coming back. Um, and I'll say that with like, I'm a little nervous to say it honestly, because I think that there's a right way to do it and there's definitely a wrong way. And that's not something that that's not a statement that I say very lightly or really very often at all in my profession, because I truly believe like businesses can be completely customized to what works for the business owner within reason. Um, but as far as all inclusive are concerned, there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do it. Most of my clients have been blank canvas. I have had a few all-inclusive venues that I've worked with that are doing really, really well. Of course, we did our research in the very beginning. They did all of their due diligence with the feasibility study and everything. So we made sure that it was safe for them to do this business model. My most recent client, well, they're not officially a client yet, but they're about to be. We're just waiting on zoning, their property to be rezoned to commercial. I'm just waiting on paperwork at this point, but he is going to be an all-inclusive venue, and he's an incredibly successful interior designer. Um, and we're talking like celebrity level. Like I had no idea who I was talking to, and and like when he was interviewing me, I had no idea and felt really ridiculous afterward. But that's another story. But anyway, he has this incredible vision of being an all-inclusive, and from a marketing standpoint, we're taking a different approach because he wants to be a speakeasy. So he's going to be taking applications for people to host their wedding, or for couples to host their weddings and events at his venue, versus just fielding a ton of inquiries. There's going to be an application process, a referral stream coming from that. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a right and a wrong way for all inclusives. And I'm really hopeful that in the appropriate markets, it's going to make a comeback.
Okay. I want to talk about that more, but I want to touch on something that I realize really relates more to what we were saying before in the last question, which was, do you think because of COVID, because there's been this really incredible shift in where people live, because a lot of jobs have been remote, so people are not necessarily needing to live downtown San Diego or downtown Dallas or downtown Houston to work for a company that's based there. You know, they can live in more locations and work remotely, and obviously the online tools are much more robust now. I think just because of basic need, right? But do you feel like because of that, there are more opportunities for these venues that could be wildly different, you know, in the country, to have a very urban looking venue, or vice versa, just because you have folks now who came from the city are now living in the country, or maybe, you know, people who have moved into the city. Do you see that this is kind of something that you feel more confident saying because of how people are moving around?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And to your point, as far as people moving from the city to the country or vice versa, just to add to that, there's a lot of people friends that I follow, or I follow on Instagram, that they're adopting a nomadic life. You know, like they have this opportunity to work from their RV or their van that they've converted, and they're traveling, which is opening their eyes, right, to all of these different types of trends and different architecture, different looks, different vibes. And maybe they traveled to somewhere in California, really fell in love with an urban vibe and want to find something like that that's local where their families live to host their venue or to host their wedding. So yeah, to your point, I think that more and more venue owners are getting a little bit more brave in taking chances on aesthetics, and I love it.
Do you think that that is going to have a, um, I guess, a trickle down effect to how venue owners are thinking about maybe rebranding themselves or maybe even doing construction? Because, like you said, maybe the biggest difference or the biggest way that a venue could set themselves apart is through, the experience that they give their couples. But now what about someone who maybe hasn't updated their venue in 8 years? There's some turf that needs to be replaced or some different things. Do you think this
Right.
is a great opportunity for them to kind of shift around a little bit, or would you still advise them to kind of stay focused in that, client experience track?
Yeah, I think that don't update your venue for the sake of updating your venue. If you're not getting new bookings and your venue is still in good condition and looks great, if you're a 5-year-old venue and updating and dumping money into a renovation isn't going to solve your booking problem.
Hmm.
Your booking problem more than likely is coming from marketing, oversaturation, things like that. Now, that's not to say if your venue needs updates, if you have holes in your sheetrock from crazy groomsmen drinking way too much, like let's have a conversation about that. And take this opportunity. If you're still in an area that is closed down, take this opportunity to do those paint touch-ups. Kenzie's probably going to kill me for saying this, but we talk almost every day. I was on the phone with her the other day and I was like, what are you doing? It sounds so weird. And she was like, oh, I'm on a ladder painting our trim at the venue. And I was like, okay. So those little like makeup aesthetics, like do that, take this opportunity and do those. But as if you're trying to fix a booking problem, dumping more money into renovations and aesthetics more than likely isn't going to fix your booking problem.
That's really powerful. And I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like a lot of venue owners, that's the first place their mind would go.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh, our bookings are down, or our inquiries are down. It's probably because we don't have our turf hasn't been replaced, or, we need a new coat of paint or whatever. And you're totally right. You're going to have happier couples perhaps,
Right.
but that's not going to bring you new business. So for those venues that are experiencing this problem, what's your advice?
Stop guessing. Stop guessing. Stop trying to triage your bleeding by guessing on what's the problem. Instead, reach out to your couples. Kinsey does a great job of this. She sends an annual survey at the end of every single year to past couples. And I would encourage everyone to take it a step further and send a survey out to anybody that didn't book with you and just say, hey, we're always looking to improve. Can you just take 5 minutes, answer these 3 quick questions, and ask your audience, ask your past couples, ask the people that didn't book, ask anybody that is on social media that has came to your venue and physically seen it, or even if they haven't, and just say like, ask the questions of why didn't you book? How can we improve? What additional items would you love to see at our venue? How can we serve you better? And get those responses, see what the common theme is, and work on that. I see a lot of venues that are just constantly guessing. And I'm like, everything is expensive nowadays. Why are we just like throwing around money and trying to put a band-aid on something when we could spend a little bit more time, a little more legwork, actually do the work and figure out exactly what the problem is and then go fix it.
That's incredible. That is so incredible. And I'm really excited. So, Damien's here writing, some of the notes down, and we're going to be cutting these up and including these. And that is a sound bite that I'm hoping that everyone listens to on repeat, because I really feel like this is a common theme, and just in the business, the venue owners that we work with, instead of spending that couple $1,000s on like we were saying, paint or physical renovations, spend that time doing a marketing study, spend that time reaching out to your couples, or, like you said, people who haven't booked with you, to get feedback, because a lot of people are guessing. And the crazy thing is they're guessing with a lot of money, right? What's the average price do you feel like, a venue owner would spend when they're creating a new venue? I know that's a wildly broad question, but like, is there kind of a general, everyone spends just over $1 million. Is that?
Yeah. So we've worked with venues that anywhere from like 700,000 all the way up to 5.5 million. That 5.5 million, I just want to give a caveat to, that is like an all-inclusive venue. So we're talking about investing in multiple revenue streams, not just the rental of one facility. If you are a blank canvas venue, and you need to go over 2.5 million within your investment, I would 100% encourage you to really sit down with your financial team and crunch those numbers, because getting the ROI in most markets going over 2.5 is going to be really difficult.
Interesting. Okay. I want to get back to, I want to ask you a question about that, but we've been talking about all inclusives versus blank canvas. Do you have a preference personally?
Personally, no, because it's not about me. My team and I love any type of challenge. So if somebody comes to us with a unique business model, they want multiple revenue streams, we always get excited for those. I wouldn't say that we would choose blank canvas or all inclusive, either one over the other.
Do you see one making more money or being more profitable?
I would love to revisit this question maybe in like next year, because
fair enough.
I'm working with 2 all-inclusives and I just don't have the data yet. I feel like the potential is there for all-inclusives.
Yeah, I'm asking some of these questions because you said you feel like these like all-inclusives are coming back. Do you feel like they for kind of a while they were maybe going out of style or out of trend because people wanted more creativity?
Well, I think they went out of style because the business model was wrong. They were making connections with vendors that weren't reflective of their brand. And so what that looked like is a high-end venue trying to keep costs low and partnering with a baker that is going to do just a standard 3-tier white buttercream cake. When they're attracting clients that are wanting more of a custom or luxury feel. So, I mean, that's definitely the one of the main things to keep in mind if you're wanting to start an all-inclusive venue and you're wanting to outsource to third parties, is to look at the vendors that are going to reflect your brand well. Y'all attract the same clients, and it seems like it would be common sense, but I feel like there are 2 main things that were the death of all inclusives back in the day, and that was lack of originality, not making those partnerships with the vendors that are attracting the same clientele as you, but also from a profitability standpoint, the profit margin just wasn't there.
Profit margin, I think I love that conversation because, like I said, some of the venue owners that we have talked to, and any venue owners that are listening to this right now, they'll think of, they want to sell a $30,000 or $40,000 wedding, and they think about it in terms of that, when the profit margin could be very similar if they're just renting their venue out for $5,000 or $7,000. There's going to be the same profit margin, just there's a bunch of other things that they're including. Do you feel like all inclusives are maybe coming back? Do you feel like that might have anything to do with the impact that COVID has had on the industry?
I think so. Going back to those micro weddings that are looking to create more of an experience for their guests, their couples are going to be looking for that type of experience level, but at the same time, like, the human race is a beast of convenience, right? Like, we want the nice luxury customized thing, but we also want it to be easy to get, right? So I think that all inclusives that are done correct are going to attract those couples. Oh shoot, there was one other point that I wanted to make to all inclusives and it just left me, but I'll come back to it. It'll come back.
we can totally wrap back around to it. I being a vendor, like starting as a staffing company in this industry, I've loved blank canvas venues because selfishly, it gave my company an opportunity to get into some venues and develop some amazing relationships with other vendors, with other venues, and the ecosystem that a all-inclusive has is a little bit more closed, and I think with good reason.
Yeah.
But do you, I think couples like options, but in your research and in the experience that you've had, do you feel like the options that couples have with a blank canvas is maybe overwhelming and maybe not the best thing?
I wouldn't say that it's not the best thing. It depends on who your ideal client is, right? So that goes back to that feasibility study. Like, who is your ideal client? Who are you wanting to serve? There's room for everybody. So all different business models. And so if you are wanting to serve that client that is maybe looking for something that's a little more budget friendly, but a step up from a backyard wedding, certainly do your research. And if the market is supportive of that, do that. I'm not telling anybody to do one business model over the other. I definitely think as long as you're doing your due diligence, doing those feasibility studies, making educated, smart decisions with your team. Every venue owner has a team, whether they realize it or not. So bringing in outside perspective is the main thing. And, as far as other venues trying to go all inclusive, this is the point that I was going to make just a second ago. I feel like the venues themselves are some of them are interested in the all inclusive approach, maybe not completely all inclusive, but partial all inclusive, because venues have a max, right? Like there are only so many dates on the calendar to sell. And once you are completely booked out, you've hit your limit, you've hit your ceiling, what now? Well, we need to go back to the drawing board because we're still looking to grow our profit margin. There's only so many ways to do that. So a lot of venues come to me and they're like, we need to add on revenue streams. What do you recommend? And so then that starts leading into more and more revenue streams, which is where that partial inclusivity comes into play. Also, to your point, as far as that ecosystem being closed off, there is good reason for that from a liability standpoint from a venue. From an insurance perspective and decreasing their liability, that's why a lot of venue owners start doing in-house bar. But I don't want vendors that are listening to this and are reading between the lines that I am liking all inclusive. I'm sure I'm pissing them off, and that's fine. I like to go against the grain, but I also, if you're pissed off, it's probably for good reason. Like I want to challenge you, like think outside the box with your business. If you're a planner and you're like, shit, don't be promoting all inclusive because then that's going to take away from my clientele. Start making those relationships with those venues. That's not to say that they can't outsource that in-house service to a third-party vendor. Get competitive, go after it, win it.
I love that. I so love that. And I want to talk about team because that's something you mentioned, but you brought up vendors and I want to get into this. Do you think that when you have an all-inclusive venue space, like you said, there are a lot of jobs within that need possibly outsourced help? Do you have a preferred way that you like, or maybe creative ways that you like to see vendors approach the venues that you work with to get on that vendor list? Because I know this is a topic that's like, all of every vendor that's listening to this right now, whether you're a DJ, a florist, bakery, whatever your trade is, staffing, catering, whatever, you want to get on that list because a lot of times the couples are booking the venue first.
Yeah.
What are some kind of best practices, or maybe how do you get on more vendor lists, venue lists?
Yeah, it's easy. It's easier than people think. And that is just
that's going to piss some people off too, because some people are out there struggling with this. So tell me, what do you?
Well, it goes back to just overthinking things, right? Like, come from a place of service. Always serve before you ask for something. I think that's a big reason why my planning firm was so successful in making relationships, really good, strong relationships with venues, is because we came from a place of service. We never asked for anything. We would serve, never ask, but it would always eventually be offered to us. So just to like put things in perspective and give some practical takeaways here, what that looks like is we, as a planning company, we would specifically target, and I know target is like, it sounds aggressive, but we would specifically go after new venues because I knew that they would have a lot of questions. So I would immediately call them, hey, I'm sure you are being pulled in a million different directions. If there is anything that I can help you with, any questions that I can answer for you, any advice I can give from a planning perspective, if you want me to come and walk your venue and give you a list of like 20 suggestions, just as an outside perspective, or if their construction is towards the end and they're about to open, hey, can I help you from a marketing standpoint? Can I come and host your first wedding for free? I will come and coordinate your first wedding for free so that you can be focused on your septic, your electrical, are all of your toilets flushing? Is everything stocked? Like, you as a venue owner want to be focused on your venue operating right, because your first wedding is a really big deal from a PR standpoint. You need to make sure that it goes off without a hitch. Let me help you make sure that's accomplished and you get that 5-star review. And I'm not asking for anything. Hey, are you going to be hosting a grand opening? Can I facilitate that for you? Can I handle vendor communication and coordination for you? Can I make this go off without a hitch for you? What can I do for you? And yes, across the board. So serving. And then it might have been 6 months later, they come to us and say, hey, we finally have our act together. We're wanting to build a preferred vendors list. You're at the top of the list. Do you want to be on it? Absolutely. We would love to take care of your clients.
Got it. So give first,
Yeah.
and let the business come to you because of, there's a level of, I think, maybe gratitude, or, you gave first. I want to completely flip on the other side of this. How much is too much? Like, how much?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
Like, no one wants to be used. Let's even like any relationship, right? If you're dating somebody or whatever, you don't want to be the one who's constantly, laying out the red carpet and realizing eventually that, you're being taken in. Absolutely.
Yep.
What's that break even point that you're kind of like, all right, we've given, now we're going to move on to the next prospect because time is limited, right? We have a certain number of minutes in the day that we need to use wisely. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So as the owner of the planning company, it was always me that would go out and make the connection. I'm never going to ask my team to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And so it was usually me doing one event for free, whether that's their first wedding, their open house, their ribbon cutting, whatever the case is, it's usually one event. And that was honestly, that's really all that it took. I didn't have to set that precedence. I never had to go to them and say, hey, I really want to serve you, but I'm only going to do it one time. So pick wisely. I never went to them with that. It was just kind of understood, and they respected that I was coming and helping, and they were grateful for that. And then when they would come back, if you do have a venue that comes back and says, hey, you did such a good job, could you handle this? I would love to handle that. Here's what that package looks like, and send them that proposal. But I think that it's all about balance, right? Like, and you from a business standpoint on the back end, you need to crunch your numbers. If you're a catering company coming in to serve somebody, that looks completely different. Your overhead looks completely different than what a planning company's overhead looks like. And so taking those numbers into consideration is going to be important when you're serving others.
That makes so much sense. I love that you said that. This podcast is so full of gold. I'm really excited. I'll actually be listening to it later on because I'm gonna, pull little bits of encouragement out of it for our own company.
That makes sense.
But I wanted to ask about the team, right? You said venues have a team regardless of, if they know it or not.
Yeah.
And so who do you think are some essential members? Like, you're going into battle, you're deciding, I want to do this venue thing, I want to have a wedding venue, despite maybe everything you've been warned by, whoever, or seen online or whatever. And you're like, I want to do this. Who do you need in your corner? Who are those relationships, those maybe vendors, maybe consultants, maybe coaches? Like, who are you hiring as a new hopeful venue owner, coming into this space?
Yeah. So this is usually a conversation that I have with my clients when I'm working with the owners directly. And I say that I'm working with the owners directly simply because I work with a lot of real estate investment companies. And so sometimes I'm not working with the owners directly. I'm working with the boots on the ground. Um, and so when I'm working with the owners directly, we have a conversation about number one, what are your strengths? More importantly, what are your weaknesses so that we can fill those gaps? And in the past, most first hires have been a venue manager to handle the day-to-day operations, to be the boots on the ground, to host the tours, to respond to the emails, to make sure CRM is going off without a hitch, all of those day-to-day operational tasks. I've had a few clients whose venue manager has been virtual, to where the venue manager loves giving the tours for right now. They love giving the tours, and I actually encourage them to give the tours
You mean the
for
owners?
the owners. Yes.
Okay.
I encourage the owners to give the tours, to be at the weddings, at least for a short amount of time when they're first opening up, so that they can see exactly how their investment is operating and see what could be improved. So in the past, it has been venue manager has been first hire. Now it's kind of shifting a little bit to where maybe venue manager isn't first hire, depending on strengths and weaknesses. Maybe it's a marketing team. If you're in a saturated market, you need a louder voice. You need better marketing material. You need a stronger social media presence. And so it really depends on the business. It depends on the owner's strengths and weaknesses. So I don't want to say that one size fits all in the first hire category.
Totally. We've been talking about saturated market versus unsaturated market. And what does that mean to you? Like when you say saturated market, what are we talking about? Is that like 5 venues within a 50-mile radius? Or are we talking 100 venues in, like, what are we talking about when you say saturated market?
Yeah. So, I mean, that the example that I gave earlier of, within a 21-mile radius, there were 19 venues, like, whoa. um, but with that, you're also looking and comparing apples to apples, right? Like if you have, and if your risk adversity, if you can take on something that is the black sheep of your industry and you are confident and have proof of concept with that, and by all means, go for your saturated market if you would like to do that. I don't have a hard and fast number for you as far as there shouldn't be X number of venues within X radius. I can tell you for myself, I actually have a clause in my contract that states I will not work with a venue that is within 30 miles of a past venue client, just to keep the integrity of the work that we have done.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. Because yeah, you're right. There is this like proximity thing there where you may be going after the same clients.
Yeah, well, and I don't ever want a venue client of mine to ever second guess that I'm sharing strategies from their experience with a new client that's in their market, and I'm trying to one up them with a new client, and I'm creating competition for them. I never want the integrity of my work to go down.
I love that. You mentioned the difference between when you're working with maybe a real estate investment firm versus working with an owner. Do you work with a lot of, do you have a lot of scenarios where you're working with a third party that's not necessarily the owner of the property?
I wouldn't say a lot. It's probably, I don't know, 1 out of 5, I would say.
Okay. Do you find those are easier or harder to work with? And I'm asking this because from a emotional standpoint, when you're the owner of a property and you've maybe put down a couple $100,000, or you've lived on the property forever, or you're very emotionally bought in. You're doing this because you love it. And the third party may be a little bit more of a like less emotional, black and white, do the numbers add up, like making some more corporate feeling decisions. What do you think about that?
Okay, so for those listening, we actually had a different topic planned for this episode, which is an investor mindset, and this question is playing into that. Jonathan was super nice to allow me to nix that topic or put it on pause for now, because I have some studying to do. But just because so much has changed from COVID.
I didn't want to get into it too much, but I'm really curious about this.
Yeah, well, it's an important question because as a venue owner, one of the main things when I'm bringing on a new venue client that I ask is, and it sounds so cliche, but it's, what is your why? Why are you starting this business? And there's no right or wrong answer, but it helps me to direct, number one, the intensity of my program. Number two, it helps me to direct different professionals for them. So, talking about an investor mindset, are you a legacy investor, meaning you're wanting to create generational wealth for your family? You're wanting to pass down this venue to your kids and your grandchildren, and your dream is for your great great grandchildren to be operating your venue. Is that why you're getting into this? If so, that's great. Let's go for it. But that's a different entity structure that we need to set you up with. Um, if your investor mindset and your why for getting into this is to make a ton of money, cool, let's do that. Let's talk about multiple revenue streams. Let's talk about your market. How can you differentiate and set yourself apart? But again, that's a different mindset, and we need to get you set up with a different entity structure. So it's two different things, and it's an important question to ask. To your point, from an emotional standpoint, that legacy investor, he's all in on every level, financially, physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, they're all in, committed, and it is very, very difficult to emotionally separate yourself. And you have to, if you are that type of venue owner, you kind of need to watch yourself, because and maybe you need some separation, right? Like, maybe your first hire should be that venue manager to give you some space, so that if you do get a negative review, it's not getting into your mental space, right? Like, you're protecting your mental space. As long as you have the right things set up from a legal and financial standpoint to protect your investment, you should be able to create that emotional space for yourself if you need it.
Do you see success with one venue translating to success in maybe a second location? Because I know, and speaking to the owner level, or even investment groups, maybe, you're like, I did so well in this market. Maybe let's say, downtown Dallas, we've got this beautiful loft space, whatever. We want to do something in the country. We're going to take a lot of the lessons that we learned. Do you feel like there is crossover, or is it like, no, you need to clear the table, clear the drawing board, and really kind of look at this effort with fresh eyes?
Yeah, one of my clients is actually coming back to me, and we're franchising. So
Okay.
I'm studying a lot on franchises right now.
I love that.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
exciting.
All right, Lindsay. Well, this has been really fun. I am
Yeah.
so excited. I think we're going to have to come on for a part 2, because
Okay.
I think that we're in very transitional period for this industry. There's obviously, with the limited inventory that a lot of venues do have, with, the certain number of dates that they can take on, and kind of this compounding of people postponing their dates and then, starting to have them now. There is a lot of a shift. But I think that it's going to be exciting to talk to you again in maybe 6 months or a year, and see how, the industry has done, and see different areas that that venue owners can improve their businesses and kind of keep pushing forward in the industry. I do have one more question for you, though.
Yeah.
When you have someone who's looking to work with you, because we might have listeners or viewers right now that are like, oh my gosh, Lindsay's incredible. We have to hire her, or we want to get into this space, or maybe we want to revamp something. What things do you wish? Maybe there's 1, 2, 3 things that you wish that venue owners knew or would do when they're approaching working with you.
Yeah. So, number one, if you are to the stage of you're looking for property, do your research on the county that you want to be in as far as your zoning laws are concerned. Make sure that you're just doing your research there. Is it going to be better for you to purchase a residential property that is that's zoned residential, that is a little bit more budget friendly within your funding process, if you're getting funding? If you're self-funding, we should be friends. But or is it going to be worth your while, in trying, if you're zoned residential, trying to flip it if you're in a relaxed county? Or is it better for you to spend the bigger bucks in your budget to go ahead and get a property that is already commercially zoned? Zoning is so tricky. And so many people come to me and they're like, well, I need you to help me navigate these zoning laws, which is impossible for me to do because I can't know the zoning laws on all counties across the nation. So do your due diligence there. The other thing is,
I
are
want to
you
touch.
willing? Yeah.
Sorry, before you say the second thing, how many venues do you think are you surprised with the number of venues that may not operate legally?
Yeah, yeah. Especially when it comes to fire codes.
Okay. And do you think that like, what's the quickest way? Because I don't think that maybe, I don't necessarily think the venue owners are intentionally putting people at risk, but I
No,
do think there's this level of like, if it's
don't
not
ask, don't tell.
exactly. Is there kind of a fine median here that people can, no one goes to the IRS with their taxes and asks for an audit every single year.
Right.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And
Yeah.
you don't want that level of scrutiny maybe, but then you also, because you'll spend all your time there, but you also don't want to be putting people in danger. Are there would you do like a safety check every year? Like, what are kind of some things that you'd
Yeah.
recommend there?
I am so like type A. I'm always going to say do a safety check every year. But there are those venues that are like, well, the fire marshal came out and they said this is the bare minimum, so that's what we're going to do. And in my mind, that video that went viral a couple of years ago of the fireworks catching the entire venue on fire in the middle of the first dance, I was just like, that's what plays in my mind. And I'm like, no, no, no. Bare minimum's not okay when it comes to fire code. So, I mean, there's just certain things that it sucks. I'm going to tell you, like, it's painful to spend the money on because you don't see it.
Mhm.
Like we just renovated our entire house and redid all the plumbing and the electrical and spent way into the five figures on all of it. And it was super painful because you can't see it, but it's the best improvement, especially when the freeze hit Texas. I was not worried about our house at all. So for a venue owner, spending the money in those areas and having the peace of mind is 100% worth it.
That's huge. HVAC systems, just
Mhm.
all of those things that don't necessarily build into the aesthetic, but are super, super important.
Yeah, the
Um,
unsexy things.
yeah, absolutely. Which are really, as a venue owner, you've got to focus on those first before you are worrying about paint colors,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I interrupted you, and now I've
No,
lost
that's
you.
okay. I know. I think I know where we left off, which was number two when working with me that I wish that they would
Yes.
understand is, are you willing to do the work? A lot of venue owners come and they say, oh, I'm spending all my time on Pinterest. I'm pulling all of these gorgeous photos. And, I really want to do this beautiful black barn. Okay, great. But there are like 50,000 nitty gritty steps that we have to get through, and none of them are going to be fun. So, are you willing? Is this something that you are passionate enough about to do the nitty gritty work, to get your hands dirty and to do this? Because it's not going to be fun staying up late at night, running your feasibility studies, looking at spreadsheets, crunching your numbers, making sure, estimating how much toilet paper am I going to spend every month so that toilet paper doesn't put me in the red. Like there's no worse thing. So, crunching those numbers isn't fun. So if you are passionate enough to do that, then you'll be successful.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap up this, maybe part one that we're doing together here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've personally learned so much, and I know folks listening or watching will learn a lot as well. And I really hope they reach out to you. So where can people find you? If people do want to hire you, or maybe just ask you a couple questions or whatever, to kind of see a little bit of an insight into your world, where do people connect with you?
Yeah, yeah. So my website is thelindsayllucas.com. We have lots of freebie downloads there. Hop on our newsletter list. It's a source of education and inspiration. I love to just send uplifting newsletters every once in a while. I'm not as consistent at it as I should be. You might get a newsletter like once a month, maybe once a quarter. But so thelindsayllucas.com, or feel free to just start a conversation with me. Everybody is welcome to email me hello@thelindsayllucas.com. Lindsay is spelled with an A.
Awesome. hello@thelindsayllucas.com.
Yes.
Cool. Beautiful. Well, Lindsay, thanks so much again for coming on the show. And I'm looking forward to part two and staying in touch. This has been fun. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a blast.